Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean Tobias, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome Amy Fuller, who's the CMO of Accenture. At 279 on the Fortune 500, Accenture is about a $43 billion consulting company with over 500,000 employees in 200 cities across 51 countries. They serve about 6,000 clients who are located in 120 countries. Bet you can't name all those. And they provide services across everything that you can imagine these days: strategy, consulting, operations, and technology, and the old and new now, the future of work category, which we'll talk about today. And what you may not know about Accenture, as a tech company now, they have over 4,800 patents and about 2,500 pending around the world. And they also have a very robust partner network of about 200 organizations around the world, which is very interesting. So, Amy, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
And thank you for having me, Dean. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Wherever here is.
Wherever we are. We're moving into the fall of 2020 here, and since about, I think it was mid-2019 when Julie Sweet became the CEO of the company, a lot has changed in Accenture. I'm a big fan of her kind of tenacity and sense of urgency, and you've been seemingly transforming everything from your services, doing some acquisitions, reinvigorating your brand on many levels. And so maybe that's a good place to start, without even COVID coming up yet. What's changed in the last year at the company?
Well, shorter response would be what hasn't changed. Julie took
exactly.
last September, and a number of things were immediately needed to happen quickly. And one of them was we had 5 years ago established a business strategy which had to do with embarking on a digital transformation journey. And we summed it up by talking about rotating to the new. And it was ourselves rotating what we did and being the first to market with digital in a big way to help our clients in turn do their own digital transformations. And we hit 70% of our business had rotated to the new. And so it was time for a new business strategy. And so that was one thing that's changed, is now we have a new business strategy that builds on the back of this rotation to the new, this 70% of our business in the new, which could be shorthanded as digital. So that was one thing. The other thing, and this is something that Julie had known was important even before she took post, so we hit the ground really running, which is any legit company in this day and age has a purpose. And it's not simply because our millennial and Gen Z generations have said, look, you need a purpose. It's important to all generations in the workplace. So that was the other thing that we got to work with immediately. And of course, they interact with one another because a business strategy, which is inherently short-term, must be faithful to the purpose of the company overall. So to do that, guess what? You have to know what the purpose of the company is. Well, then, if you've got a new purpose, you've got a new business strategy, of course you need a new brand. Right. Because the brand is just the tool of the business strategy. And so that, from my vantage point, has kept me extremely busy for the past year. And that doesn't count all of the other external things that have come into play and had an impact on how we look at ourselves and how we come across and what are the objectives that we set. But it's been a super fast journey. And I'll stop it there, Dean. Clearly, I could go on forever. I won't. I'll spare you listeners and lookers, but.
No, it's all good. And you don't just focus on the brand and advertising, though you did do a nice new campaign. I'm just always fascinated by, I actually use an old Accenture ad that shows the elephant on the surfboard making fun of your clients. And I'm always amazed how much money you guys spend on advertising. It's not like some CEO sitting in his office somewhere and going, oh, we should call Accenture. I just saw a commercial. So I understand the reasons and all that. We won't go into it, but just part of your job. So the going into 2020, you guys had a certain plan. I've always noticed consultants, the big five, the big four, have been kind of dragging people into digital transformation. Global 1000s. They didn't have a sense of urgency or the sense to spend sometimes, so they slowed things down. So your whole point about, going faster in digital has totally been transformed, well overwritten in terms of the press, but just transformed during 2020 because of pandemic and a lockdown and a distributed workforce, and companies like yours now employing 3, 4, 5. JP Morgan Chase at one point was employing 5 generations, including the silent generation, in the same building. Yeah. So that whole, having more purpose, we get all of that. Let's just drill down into the impact of all these companies saying, holy cow, just went to the board meeting, we need digital now. And then I've envisioned all the big 4 consulting firms' phones ringing off the hooks, if we still use phones. And there must be a lot of demand right now for all these digital transformation programs that were kind of dusted off and started to get executed, hopefully in a different way, but in a little more hyper-speed way this year. Is that, am I right?
I mean, it's been incredible. Single best chart of the year. Single best chart.
Up into the
from
right?
Our sales organization is quotes from clients. And this was fairly early on in the crisis saying, I wish I had. I wish I had already moved to Microsoft Teams. I wish I had already moved to the cloud. I wish I had moved faster on the digital transformation. It's really incredible. And in fact, some of the work that was required over the past year had to do with incredibly fast, incredibly agile implementations of things that institutions or clients had wished they had done the previous year.
Right.
So it's been dramatic, unbelievably dramatic.
Took a crisis to kind of wake up a lot of companies. I mean, I've been in the boardrooms and listened to them and talked to them and gave them some independent advice. And it all kind of comes back to, it's about good governance and good management, but then it's also about competitiveness and the changing environment. And for some, it's been the threat of extinction. Quite frankly, that'll speed you up. Yeah, for
clients who had a head start, even if they weren't finished, they were in really good shape. And I have to say there was one big retailer in the U.S. Who had started a multi-channel migration, which of course most retailers would find themselves needing such a thing.
Right.
And now I happen to go way up to the North Country in New York State, which is very leanly populated. I spent 6 months there. I have a link there. And of course, my husband's computer died within the first week, naturally. And this was the point at which nothing was open. And I thought, we're cooked. I mean, and he can't use mine, so we have a really big problem. Well, wouldn't you know, he ended up calling in, going online, finding this particular retailer and being able to order exactly what he needed down to the precise detail, drive to a parking lot about a half an hour away, sit in the parking lot, pop the trunk open while the multi-channel manifestation was happening. Computer placed in the trunk shut, drive away, problem solved. Well, it turns out that was a speeded up endeavor that Accenture had been involved in.
Right.
And the fact that the retailer had already started this work made it infinitely easier to then scale up big time. And it really, really made a difference. And so you can see the benefits of having moved forward. And then how that gives you a head start, a running start that then you can scale up. And of course, it's all about speed, scale, and agility right now. And we see that over and over again.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Both Walmart and, almost said Accenture. Oh my gosh, Amazon. the 2 A's. No, kidding.
It's with an A. All the same.
Yeah, they weren't essential during the pandemic. They were utilities. It has really obviously accelerated their growth, some think unfairly. So, we just interviewed the head of product from Walmart, and we'll be publishing that this week about the entire rollout. And then I kind of write about what's going to happen with Christmas. It's just going to be the most bizarre thing you've ever seen with Walmart and Target and others doing these. I call them parking lot deals. It's kind of like old mafia deals, like you just explained. Just show up, just put it in the trunk, don't say anything.
It's magical. I got to say, it was magical. We went from utter despair to, wow, okay, all right.
Yeah, moving into a new house, I can't tell you how many times Amazon has come to this house every day during the move-in for a month. Anyway, but you bring up a really good point. Omnichannel, multichannel, I think they're dead. The whole concept now has also been accelerated because you've got in-store, you've got online, you've got curbside, you've got parking lot deals, you've got all this stuff. And you're right. The ones that kind of did plan ahead, some of them did more than others, are able to actually triangulate all that and know who you are. And versus when I'm in the store, they don't care. When I'm online, it's very different. So as a CMO, you must have some delight in that Omnichannel is finally, we need a new word for it exactly at this point, I think.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I read somewhere someone contended that there are no changes. We love to talk about change. We love to talk about change. There are no changes. And you got to step back and say, really? There are no changes?
You are the change.
Seeing permanent changes in behavior.
Yep.
You name the sector, you're seeing a permanent change, not to mention the fact that the category of, I wish I had already moved to Microsoft Teams, that category, we converted the NHS in the UK in a matter of days, more than 1 million people onto Teams from not being on Teams. That is a permanent change in terms of how you understand how you can work together. And it's been amazing. I mean, I've always worked remotely, certainly with my team at Accenture, and Accenture is inherently remote because in your perfect intro, we're all over the place. We have teams that are all over the place. But now we're really, really, really good at working remotely. I feel like we can do anything.
You have to be, and you have to teach your clients to be. You're in a very strange position. I mean, I've taught in your labs. I've done sessions in your labs around the world, and even Accenture Interactive, a separate Fortune 500 on its own, is really kind of thrives on that interaction. Post-it notes all over behind me, just that craziness of so the whole collab beyond Zoom and Teams and all that. Right. I think it's fair. These real interactive tools that allow you to actually get stuff done and work together, they're not really integrated with those that well yet, but I assume you guys have figured that out, and hopefully it's making you more competitive, because it seems like your competitors are doing the same things. I mean, their travel expenses are way down. That's the only silver lining in this, and the demand is. Yeah.
The jet lag index is way down in my personal case, I will say. Although, do you get jet lag if you're working from like 5 a.m. to 9 p.m.?
You do.
I think that counts as jet lag. Don't you think that you still get sort of jet lag points for that?
It's called Zoom lag. There's a dirtier term for it, but I won't say it.
You'll have to text it to me secretly.
It's fascinating from a consumer point of view. I know you guys do a lot of consumer consulting, but the sponsor of the program, Revive, has a Revive Health and Wellness Index, and searches for different types of skincare products. And because people are staring at their face so much, personally, I don't like being on camera, especially when you watch it later. So the whole concept of taking care of yourself and taking more vitamins and supplements and skincare products, which I neglected to do before this shoot, is way up 400, 500,000% on some websites. It's just certain things are booming, whereas cosmetics and hair care not so much. People aren't going out, so it's fascinating to watch that. But
I hadn't thought of that, Dean. But I relate. Yes, I would agree. I would agree with that finding. Yes.
Yeah, the whole online fatigue is a problem, because you can't. We find with our employees you can't. And I'm guilty of this. It's like you schedule one and another and another and another. Right. And we use all platforms. So it's not just Zoom. It's, everything from Mike, we had the president of Microsoft on, and he noticed that we weren't using Teams. This program uses Skype for recording, but we use Zoom, we use Meet, we use Teams. Does anyone use Cisco anymore? I do. We use whatever that company is comfortable with. And, but anyway, back to these services. You've got to accelerate. You've got to come up with some new. How are you differentiating from the competitors? You came from one yourself, but you've got the big three. I'll call them, along with you, of course, which McKinsey, Boston, and Bain, and then a different league of the old guys. Deloitte, EY, and KPMG all have labs, all do innovation. But I probably put those in two buckets, maybe. But how do you differentiate?
Well, there are a couple of things that I have found are unique at Accenture. And I've been here for a little over 3 years. So I still feel like I've got the outsider eyes versus many of my colleagues literally grew up here. And there is, for speed and scale, none better, for one thing, given our footprint and the sheer diversity of where we are. The other thing, though, and I learned this, I love to do brand tracking, I have to say. And I always find things that are illuminating and useful. And one of the things that recently we were looking at is some regression analysis. And it got at, drivers of persuasion and professional services. What is the single most important? And then what are the other really, really important things? It's industry knowledge, overwhelmingly.
I agree.
And one of the observations that we have made as you see again, from my favorite slide, I wish I'd moved to the cloud now. Big movement.
Followed by what's the cloud? That was my favorite board.
What is the cloud? That's always good.
It's the haze
We
that's
have a
over
lot
the
of
boardroom
training
table.
on that.
There's a cloud around you right now.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's not a rain cloud. It's a fluffy, lovely cloud. But now what we're seeing is that the kind of cloud migration that's happening in most sectors is the kind that you really need the partner to really, really understand your business. Because the easy stuff is out of the way. So now it's the stuff that's really mission critical. So industry knowledge, which is, we are incredibly deep in industry knowledge. But I will say the other thing is when we set about, what is our purpose actually, you always seek to make it not a boring description of the status quo, but big foot in reality, big foot in what is actually true of the organization. And it is big technology experience and ecosystem relationships and ability to understand how humans interact with that technology. And one thing we found out in talking to clients, both as we went into the episode of what is our purpose and then to make sure we landed correctly, was what are you worrying about or what are you dealing with? And from many of them, we heard the issue of the moment is human and technology. How do they interact? How to make the most of it? And so we landed on language that had to do with our ability to deliver on the promise of technology and human ingenuity. And I do not think that is a short-term situation. Right. I think that is a very enduring with us into the future and definitely kind of a problem. At Accenture, just the diversity of the business, and you mentioned Accenture Interactive, they're all about the business of experience. So the business of experience is all about how people experience things, whether they are the consumer end users of our clients or the business to business clients or customers of our clients. And the experience economy, not a new thought, but one that still is not completely solved. And I remember when the experience economy was first coined literally decades ago.
Right.
And it's still a work in progress.
It really is. Most people don't know.
Why? Why is that? But
I'll throw in my 2 cents. Having just been the chairman of Okta, the company we sold to Salesforce, user experience design consultancy. I'm also an advisor at the NSF, National Science Foundation. Big, boring government organization.
Dean, what don't you do? Can you give me something you're bad at?
I'm still working on a podcast host. It's been 10 years and I'm still trying to figure this part out. But I was fascinated by, because IDEO partners with us and they teach these teams that are funded by the NSF. These are independent professors, companies, organizations that are all working on big problems that I can't really totally understand, but I'm, coaching them anyway because it's scientific. But, we're giving them a few $1 million each. The amount of ethnography that's done in the B2B, the government organizations, that's the part to me that's a huge win for consulting companies that everyone thought it was just Accenture Interactive is just for consumer stuff. I'm like, they haven't even scratched the surface, I bet, on the B2B government agency, global kind of user experience design stuff. Has a wrench been thrown into that because ethnography, not to get too geeky here, is typically one-on-one. I mean, we could do some here. I could show you, the new app from Revive, and you'll go, well, I don't know, it's the wrong color. But doing it in person is a very different experience. How are you guys? How are they navigating that?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question, and I love ethnographies. And coming out of decades of ad agency work, we relied really heavily on that kind of qualitative insight. But I would say that you can learn an incredible amount behaviorally. You can do a lot. The online focus group is, or the online qualitative work can be incredibly revealing. And I think in some cases probably better. I mean, I learned a lesson a hard way very early on in my career, and it was about cooking. So I was working with a wonderful little food brand, and we needed to up usage. And so we had a bunch of people who were their home cooks, and we said, how about, these ideas? Oh, yes, I would do that. I would do that. I would do that. And then guess what? We advertised it. Nothing moved. And then I realized, okay, cooking is one of those things that people don't tell the truth about.
It's very personal, too.
Yeah, face to face, they are going to say, yes, I'm an experimental cook. But then or maybe this is the one thing you're not good at, Dean, is home cooking, is people fall into ruts. And you cook the same thing over and over and over again, and you really don't change.
Yeah, that would have been my mother making liver on Fridays. That definitely was not at home.
I think, are we brother sister? Because I too had been.
It was awful.
Yeah, it's terrible.
That's actually a great metaphor because food is an experiential experience, just to double down on that. And my style of cooking is whatever's in the house from the fridge, and I just make it up. I don't go to YouTube or anything. And people said, well, you really should because there's better recipes.
Okay, you mean friends, clearly, yes.
I'm learning, but that's an interesting segue into just like growth innovation consulting. So growth and innovation is what most of your clients want. Like, please help us grow and not die. I find death is not fun. I have this program called Dancing with Startups, and we teach it at Kellogg, and kind of takes everyone through the build, buy, borrow process. Should I build this internally? Should I acquire it, which Accenture has done a lot of? Or should I partner, which is the borrow part? Just was easier, 3 Bs. And so obviously partnering is off the charts. The Dancing with Startup programs kind of pairs up the largest corporations in the world with some of the smallest to actually solve their problems and not necessarily acquiring them. And so just curious on your perspectives of how Accenture is helping companies kind of navigate through that. Maybe we start with your own portfolio. Right. You guys have bought a bunch of services companies. I think last year you bought Droga, which was, pretty interesting agency, pretty big price tag. But did that go into interactive, I assume, or?
It is, yeah. Yep.
Before you answer that, the follow-up question to that is you started Accenture Interactive a long time ago, I forgot, at least a decade. And now isn't everything interactive? I mean, that must be so core to all the projects now. But that's a follow-up one. Let's stick with build, buy, borrow. And, do you acquire innovation these days? Do you build it internally? And what are your
everything. We do everything. And in fact, one of the truths that we've seen emerge from our clients, as well as from our own research, is that there's an acknowledgement that nothing happens alone. You do things within an ecosystem and with partners and with others. And one thing that we're doing, you, of course, probably are paying close attention to what's going on with the Sustainable Development Goals and how are clients using the SDGs? Are they using them? And Julie Sweet, our CEO and SAP at WEF many months ago established that we would work together to create a framework by which companies could measure their progress against the SDGs, which is something that we really believe in. And so that kind of partnership is, I think, a sign of the times. It's a sign of the truth of what it takes to really innovate. And we have vast resources. We have a really robust innovation network. You yourself have been at our labs, which are astonishing. Many, many techniques, a lot that we can do. But it really, the degree to which you can partner and be better together is a real strength. I mean, I would also say that, again, our the what we have and who we have to work with within our own house. And Droga 5 is a great example. They landed immediately. We said, okay, you're with us. Now you're going to please work with us. So they were helping determine what our purpose and our new brand would be. And it was very interesting. This might be unique, semi-unique. It's always dangerous to use the word unique. But here you have a top-notch agency doing work on behalf of essentially a client, which is Accenture. But guess what? You are also now Accenture. So you're doing work for a client on behalf of your own self. At one point, we noticed that on PowerPoint or on presentation slides that it said, from Droga 5 with love. Now, in decades of agency life, not only have I never written that ever on a presentation.
With love?
But I've never seen it. No, I might have had love in my heart, but to actually see it, it was really, it was a wonderful experience. But that's also where growth comes from, is the kind of thinking that the likes of a Droga 5 and literally Droga 5 can bring. The kind of innovation about how you solve problems, how you get to the answer. How do you understand what, in fact, you are all about?
Yeah, you mentioned co-creation and open innovation, which is really what Build by Borrow is about. It's like stop building everything yourself.
Yeah.
It's too slow. Yeah. So Accenture Interactive, I think they've got partnerships with Adobe, Salesforce, and SAP. What are those all about, just at a high level? Why are those partnerships? Why are they important?
So there are, in fact, I'll take Adobe because we are, we do a lot with Adobe. I personally benefit quite a lot from our use of Adobe and our own marketing platforms. They bring expertise, they bring perspectives that are extremely generative and additive to what we're able to do. So we've got big relationships with many, many players in the ecosystem, and they are invaluable. They're invaluable to our clients, and they're invaluable to us.
So let's go back to the other question, which was, does Accenture Interactive cease to exist 10 years from now? I mean, aren't they a systemic part of any client if they're not like looking at that angle? Seems like the project is a little out of shape there. It doesn't with the acceleration of digital.
So I would say digital is everywhere. Digital is systemic, and that's why we no longer have a thing called Accenture Digital. Yeah. Because digital is, air. It's water, it's air, it's everywhere. Accenture Interactive, and you could ask, why are you still calling it Accenture Interactive if interactive is everywhere? It's a discrete, distinct skill set. Business of experience types, because we have creative agencies such as Droga 5 and others who are very, very special. Of course, I'm very close to. We have design thinking shops. We have ability to do marketing operations at scale. So we have distinctive skills within the Accenture Interactive family that coexist with everything else, but it is digital that is everywhere. Absolutely everywhere, and it's not no longer gets its own name because we would be renaming the whole company. Yeah, just don't put the word digital, which many companies did 10 years ago, and then right. Well, that's naming is not easy. Naming is you can't. Yeah.
So, how does Accenture boost growth? We're talking about growth and innovation for your clients, but what do you guys do next?
Well, I would say that that what we're talking about now and what we're delivering is 360-degree value. And specifically, 360-degree value by embracing change, which is another truth, not just of the moment, but clients have been contending with perpetual change for a while now, and that's not going away. And 360-degree value is an increasing acknowledgement. Definitely, we are living it, and we are seeing our clients as well needing to think about full body of stakeholders. And that is, it's a mandate. It's also a growth driver, the ability to articulate what that value is and how we deliver it. And again, cloud, perfect example, because we've got this tool, a proprietary, one of the many, of the thousands that you referenced, that among other things can model the carbon impact of various cloud solutions. So before we do anything, we can actually model out, okay, what is the most amenable from a carbon footprint perspective for various cloud scenarios. And that's just one example of how we can do the 360-degree value delivery, figure it out in advance, and then deliver it. Now, if we were talking definitely not 10, even 5 years ago, I don't know that we would be talking about this.
No, they're still trying to get their arms around it, but now, it's not something a CTO is going to ask, but now the board is kind of asking it about every quarter.
Yeah, you got to ask it.
Especially
you got to answer it too. So
especially the long-term investments and all that.
Yeah.
So what's been the biggest challenge for you guys, in this bizarre year? Besides getting a parking lot laptop deal, what else?
Yeah, well, that was just really, what could be harder than that?
It was just table stakes, yeah.
So I think we run fast. We work hard. We're known for, brains and brawn and agility and speed and scale. My question right now is, how do you keep people happy? Mm-hmm. How do you really keep people happy? And that's, people will work hard regardless, but how do you keep people happy?
Many companies have been, since their travel budget, like a Salesforce, massive travel budget, zero-ish. And so they've reallocated money to different things.
Yeah.
Even companies like Logitech, same thing. It's like, even though they make all this equipment, it's like, how can we help people be more effective in their homes and pay for things and give them things? And
right.
But, that wears off too. It's a whole different dynamic if you're not letting your people back to the office.
There are many techniques. We have a bunch on my team that we use. One thing is that we have this motto of looking at things early, ugly, and often. So it basically says,
I mostly see the ugly part these days a lot.
Well, so one of the leaders on my team actually created, a digital stamp, early, ugly, and often, to say, okay, this is one of those. It's not going to be perfect, but we found that, if you wish people to feel comfortable and they can't read body language because you're not together, that you give permission that, okay, we're going to talk this out. We're going to do it early enough that you can course correct and make sure we've got the right kinds of connections baked in. And it is things like that are great in real life, and they're really essential when you are robbed of some of the conventional cues that being together in person gives you.
Yeah, I like that. Well, Amy, I want to thank you for having you on today. And I think as a parting comment, and maybe I'll just do this one, is I think as a challenge, I think you and I should come up with a top 10 list of, how can you make your employees more happy?
I love it.
I think it's going to have to roll quarter by quarter, though. It can't just sit there for a year because, gosh knows, it'll be outdated by Christmas. But that'd be a good follow-up for us someday.
I love it.
You've been listening to Amy Fuller, the CMO of Accenture. Good to see you today. Hopefully next time we can be in one of your labs. Take care.
Thanks, Dean. It's been a pleasure.